Okay, so today we are going to solve multi-step equations. And the date is the 27th. Okay, so let's take a look at an example like this. I have 2m minus 1 equals -3. So our entire goal here is to isolate the variable, which is m. And in order to do that, I need to start removing the other things from this side of my equation. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this constant, which is the -1. And in order to get it to move, I have to do the inverse. So since this is a -1, the inverse would be a +1 or adding 1. And whatever I do to one side, I always do to the other side because I need to keep my equation balanced. So my work should look like this: adding 1, adding 1. This creates a zero pair, so it disappears. I'm left with 2m equals -2. Now I need to do the inverse again. These are touching, which means the inverse is going to be division. So I need to put divide by 2, and over here I divide by 2. 2 over 2 makes one whole, because anytime my numerator and denominator match, it makes a whole. 1 times m is m, and then a -2 divided by 2 makes a -1. And then I box my answer. We always need to do a check once we look at an equation. So here I'm saying the answer is m is equal to -1. I rewrite the original equation. So my original equation is 2m minus 1 equals -3. I'm going to then substitute the -1 for m. When I substitute, I always put it inside of a parenthesis, so it holds true to what the original equation was. So 2 substituting -1 minus 1 equals -3. Now I look at my order of operations. I multiply first. This becomes a -2 minus 1 equals -3. And then from here, this is an integer problem, so I need to remember that when this is a -2 minus 1, this is the same thing as -2 plus -1, which equals -3. And -3 equals -3, so there you have it. You'll notice that on my one side here, I didn't change anything, right? I'm only manipulating this side. And at the end, I should have two things that are equal to one another. So that is one example. Here is another example. Here we go. I have 8 times the quantity of x plus 100 minus 3 is equal to 837. So when I look at my order of operations, I look to see if I can simplify within my parenthesis. The answer is no, because these are not like terms. The next thing I look for is multiplication. There is multiplication happening here. The multiplication is the 8 touching the parenthesis, and touching always means multiply. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute this, and I have 8 times x plus 8 times 100 minus 3 equals 837. Now I'm going to simplify from here. 8 times x makes 8x plus 8 times 100 makes 800 minus 3 equals 837. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to isolate my variable x. Now, I am going to choose to do this a little bit differently. You could start by simplifying here. But when I look at this problem, I think, well, it's going to be a lot easier to take away 800, right? So instead of like 797 or something, because then I'm going to end up like regrouping and whatever. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this 3. I'm going to create a 0 pair by saying I'm adding 3 to both sides. And then I rewrite what I'm left with, which is 8x plus 800 is equal to 840. Now I'm going to do the inverse of 800. And I'm doing that to get the 0 pair here because I'm working towards isolating my x. This creates 40. Oops. There we have it. That leaves me with 40. These are touching, which means multiply. So the inverse here would be a divide by 8 and a divide by 8. And x equals 5. And there you have it. And then we should always do the check. So off to the side here is going to be my check work. I have 8 times x plus 100 minus 3 equals 837. I am going to substitute because my x is equal to 5. So I have 8 times 5 plus 100 minus 3 equals 837. Now, when I look into my parenthesis here, I can simplify. So I need to do that first. So I end up with 8 times 105 minus 3 equals 837. And then I'm going to do a little decomposition so I can do this in my head. So I have basically 8 times 100, which is 800, and 8 times 5, which is 40, and 100 plus 40, or I'm sorry, 800 plus 40 makes 840 minus 3 is equal to 837, and 840 minus 3 is 837, which is equal to 837, so that checks out. One important thing to keep in mind is that it is never okay to do a false check. And what I mean by that is substitute the number and then just tell me that they equal to each other. Okay, if you are checking your equations, that is the key way to know whether or not you are right or wrong. So essentially, you should always be able to get 100% because you're checking your work to make sure it's correct. So there you have it, solving equations, and that's what we're working on.